All right, you ready to dive into some serious brain food? Today we're tackling your fascinating college lecture notes on paleocomplexity.
Paleocomplexity.
Yeah,
Wow. Now, before you picture Indiana Jones racing a boulder to grab the last Turing machine,
right.
let's unpack what this actually means.
Right.
It's essentially the study of early computer science, back when the field was figuring out its own possibilities, kind of like exploring uncharted territory.
I love that. We're talking about those early pioneers who were essentially trying to map the computational cosmos before anyone even knew what a computer could truly do.
Right.
And speaking of pioneers, your notes mention a Professor Aaronson who seems to have a real knack for making this complex stuff engaging.
Yes.
He even calls early computer scientists diagonalosaurs, which, by the way, wins the award for Best Dino Nerd Pun. His enthusiasm is contagious. And that's evident in how he uses the evolution of life on Earth as a metaphor for the development of this field. You've got mass extinctions of outdated ideas, explosions of new concepts, and even the emergence of these theoretical beings called quantodactyls.
Okay.
Before we get to those quantodactyls,
Right.
let's talk about what those early computer scientists were actually grappling with.
Sure.
Your notes start by talking about how they were obsessed with figuring out whether any statement about real numbers, those never-ending decimals, could be proven true or false.
Okay.
The thinking was, crack that code and you've cracked the universe of computation.
Right. Initially, they figured, hey, if we can determine the truth or falsehood of any statement about these real numbers, we've essentially created a computational God mode. But here's where it gets really interesting and where complexity comes into play.
Okay, let's unpack this complexity thing because it's clearly a game changer.
Okay.
It's not just about whether something can be computed, but how long it would actually take.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like saying you could walk to the moon eventually.
Sure, it's technically possible, but not exactly practical. They started realizing that even with incredibly powerful computers, some calculations would take longer than the age of the universe to solve.
So even if we had a computer running since the Big Bang, some problems would still be stuck on that dreaded loading screen.
Precisely. And that's when they realized they needed a way to classify problems based on how much time and resources they'd require. This is where your notes mention the Time Hierarchy Theorem, essentially a way to categorize problems based on their computational hardness.
So some problems are just inherently trickier than others, like trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle, where the pieces keep multiplying every time you look away.
A very creative analogy. And this theorem proves that no matter how clever your algorithm, your problem-solving recipe, so to speak, some problems are just destined to take an impractically long time.
It's like there's a cosmic speed limit for computation, and some problems are just stuck in the slow lane. So even with infinite time and a whole lot of coffee, you couldn't outrun some of these computational black holes.
That's one way to put it. But it gets even weirder. Professor Aaronson, he throws another curveball with this thing called the Blum Speedup Theorem.
Okay.
It basically says even if you find a faster algorithm for a problem, there's always an even faster algorithm out there.
So it's like there's always a faster route on Waze, even if you think you've already found the absolute fastest one.
Exactly. But here's the catch. Those even faster algorithms, they might be so ridiculously complex that they're practically useless in the real world.
Okay, so it's like finding a shortcut that's technically shorter in distance,
Mhm.
but it takes you through like this maze of wormholes and alternate dimensions.
You got it. The Blum Speedup Theorem really highlights the limits of what we can realistically compute. Just because a faster way exists in theory doesn't mean we'll ever be able to find it, let alone understand it.
Okay, so that's a lot to process about the limits of computation.
Yeah.
But then Professor Aaronson, he throws in this mind-bending connection to like biological life, and suddenly we're not just talking about algorithms anymore. We're talking about the very nature of information itself.
And this is where Professor Aaronson's approach is so effective. He uses this concept of a program that can print its own code, like a digital blueprint for itself, to illustrate how information can be both the blueprint and the product.
So like how DNA has the instructions to build more DNA.
Exactly. It's a mind-boggling concept, but it's happening all around us in the natural world. And get this idea predates our understanding of DNA. Von Neumann, a real pioneer in computer science, was already thinking about self-replicating machines back in the 1950s. Then boom, Crick and Watson discovered DNA, a real-world example of this principle in action.
It's like the universe is written in code and life found a way to hack the system.
And it gets even more meta than that. Remember that bit about a program having access to its own code? Well, Professor Aaronson uses that to introduce this really wild thought experiment. Would water still be water if it wasn't H2O?
Right. Okay, now that one threw me for a loop. I mean, it looks like water feels like water, quenches your thirst like water.
Mm.
What else could it be?
Well, that's where things get philosophical. Frege and Russell, two very serious philosophers, might say if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's water. But then along comes Saul Kripke, and, it's about to get real when a philosopher enters the chat and he says, hold on a minute, water is defined by its molecular structure, H2O. Anything else, no matter how convincing, isn't actually water.
So you could have like a perfect imitation of water, but at a fundamental level, it wouldn't be the real deal.
Right. And this is where Kripke brings in this idea of rigid designators.
Yeah.
These are terms that are fixed to a specific thing in the world, like water is fixed to the molecular structure, H2O. And here's where it gets really wild. He uses this idea to poke at the mind-body problem.
You mean the question of how our physical brains give rise to consciousness, that subjective experience of being?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's a big one.
Exactly. Kripke uses the water analogy to argue that you can't just reduce consciousness to a bunch of neurons firing.
So even if we could map every single neuron and understand all the electrical signals, would that truly explain the feeling of what it's like to experience the color red or the taste of chocolate?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it seems like even a room full of computer scientists with infinitely fast algorithms might not be able to compute that.
Wow, this deep dive into your paleocomplexity notes has been quite the journey.
It has.
We've covered so much ground, from the very definition of computation to like the philosophical implications of what it means for something to even be considered real.
It is really amazing how these seemingly abstract ideas from those early days of computer science still resonate today.
Absolutely. We started with those early computer scientists trying to pin down the truth or falsehood of any statement about numbers,
Right.
which led us to this whole idea that some problems are just inherently harder to compute than others.
Yeah.
It's like the universe itself has a speed limit for how fast we can compute things.
Yeah. And then just as we thought we were starting to get a grip on this whole idea of computational limits, we stumbled upon the Blum Speedup Theorem.
Oh, yeah.
This crazy idea that there might always be an even faster algorithm out there somewhere, but it could be so complex that it's essentially beyond our grasp.
Right.
It's enough to make your head spin thinking about it.
It really does. And it makes you think twice about those loading bars
Yeah.
that we see on our computers all the time.
Right.
But then things got really interesting when we switched gears and started talking about how Professor Aaronson connects these computational concepts to biological life,
Right.
specifically with this idea of self-replicating programs.
Yeah.
And it's like suddenly we're seeing DNA, the blueprint of life,
Yeah.
through a computational lens.
It really highlights how fundamental information is not just in the digital realm, but in the physical world as well.
And then just when we thought it couldn't get any wilder, we went from self-replicating programs to debating the philosophical nature of water with Kripke.
Last,
Who knew that H2O could be so profound?
it's a real testament to Professor Aaronson's ability to weave together these different threads, computation, biology, philosophy, to really illuminate these deeper questions about knowledge, reality, and even consciousness.
So for our listener who's been with us on this deep dive into your notes, what would you say is like the one key takeaway from this whole exploration of paleocomplexity?
I think the biggest takeaway is that exploring the limits of computation isn't just about building faster computers or writing more efficient code. It's about understanding the very nature of information logic and the boundaries of what we can know.
It's like those early computer scientists were explorers charting a new frontier.
Mhm.
And in doing so, they stumbled upon these really big questions that went way beyond the realm of just computer science and right into the very heart of what it means to be human in this universe of information.
Exactly. And those are questions that we're still grappling with today in all sorts of fields, from artificial intelligence to even cosmology. Professor Aaronson's Paleocomplexity lecture isn't just a history lesson. It's an invitation to really ponder some of the most fundamental questions about ourselves and the universe.
It really makes you think. And for our listener out there, the next time you're waiting for your code to compile or staring out at the vast night sky, remember those paleocomplexity pioneers who dared to ask these big questions about computation, because in doing so, they ended up illuminating some of the most profound mysteries that we're still trying to unravel today.